Hey guys, it's me Shay again. So in this video, I'm going to discuss the causes behind toxic masculinity, except I don't actually know the causes behind toxic masculinity. I'm sure there's some anthropological, some sociological, evolutionary reasons for this, but I don't know them. What I do know, what I do think I am in a position to hypothesize is what is the mentality behind it and what is causing us to perpetuate it. Why do we, despite knowing the harm that it's causing, why do we continue to push this mentality and and perpetuate it over generations and generations? All right, so let's get into it. So let's see what my first idea is. I don't know if anyone's gonna get this. It's really, really unique. It is, wait for it, the patriarchal society. Essentially, the world that we spawned into, is built on capitalistic, hyper competitive, man first, profit first, dominance is glorified, unforgiving patriarchal systems that reinforce wow, I really can't say the R. I don't know how to say R. Rigid, is that okay, whatever, rigid gender roles. We glorify aggression and we suppress vulnerability. That's just the society we live in. Gender roles are believed to be like a one size fits all solution, but they just aren't. They in fact box people in such a way that it's caging people in, as opposed to empowering them or allowing them to connect to their sort of divine feminine or divine masculine, right? It boxes people in because people are very varied, because no one has the same upbringing, no one has the same coding or programming that would make any sort of gender role applicable to anyone. So these systems may have been beneficial at some point, but they are outdated and irrelevant now at this point. Think of culture flowing over as a stream over time. We spawn when we are born and we're flung into this culture, and we conform because culture has more influence over us than we have over culture, and I'm talking about the average person. And so we internalize these belief systems that we're born into, whether we want to or not, because they're established over time, and everything that we interact with in society, in our lives, is built on these pre-established and pre-agreed upon conventions, social conventions. And because it's a man first world that we live in, men are leaders of our world, in fact even the universe, because we've also seen that all the leaders of our religions, of the majority of the religions of the world, are male. And so naturally, if you are such a the king of the universe, essentially, men are going to be held to impossible standards. There is no room for failure or weakness, right? It's a dog eat dog situation. You have to be the alpha, you have to be completely flawless, spotless, right? And so to some extent it's even justified, because you do need to have exceptional abilities to be leaders and gods, right? Except the problem arises when every man is expected to hold himself to such a standard, and additionally every person holds every man to such a standard. And so there's a distinct sort of gender struggle which unnecessarily bleeds into spaces which don't require this gendered functioning. For example, family, or for example the bedroom, for example also friend circles and workplaces, and even legislatures or conversations. You see men talking over everyone else, dismissing any perspective that does not match his own. And frankly, it's really detrimental. All right, that was the first point. My second point is going to be society and parental expectations. So even before we're born, there are expectations associated with the gender or our family expects us to be born, right? there is a tendency for people to be aligned more traditionally, more conservative, and so that deeply shapes the way that we are raised. So say for example, you're born a male child, a family that hopes for a male child will either be joyful or will be joyful, right? Because you were born a male child, and their pride or disappointment is a projection of their own beliefs about what they believe a male child should be, or for that matter, a female child. So if I was born a female child but my family didn't want me to be born a female child, they would be disappointed, and that shapes the way that they sort of raise me. Right, and it takes sort of exceptionally kind and wise parents to accept the child for who the child is and not what they want the child to be, or not who they want the child to be. And oftentimes that's not the case, as we have seen a lot, right? There have been times, I mean, we have observed that male children are preferred a lot, and so that might also explain kind of the entitlement that comes up as well, but that's a different conversation for a different video. We will talk about that. So for example, male children are expected to be traditionally male, right? We've heard questions like, what would you do if your son turned out to be gay, right? That's supposed to be shameful because he's not traditionally male, he's not heterosexual, stuff like that. We've heard these things a lot. For example, the default belief, a lot of traditional people believe that male children will play sports and their fathers will have like a sort of traditional ritual that, that the father will connect with the son on sport. And it can be disappointing for parents if the male child turns out to be non-athletic and maybe shows an aptitude in like art or music or something like sort of less masculine, for the sake of this example. And then there is a lack of support when the child expresses interest in something else, and then as a result the child is getting the subliminal messaging that is constantly saying, oh, you're not good enough, you're not meeting our expectations, kind of disappointing us. And so the child internalizes this idea that he is not worthy or he's not enough, and then he continues to feel poorly about himself for the rest of his life. And so this sense of poor self-worth will continue to impact him, and then now he's an adult, and now his parents are dead, long gone, and he has a child of his own, and then he will try to overcompensate his poor self-worth by maybe hitting his children, hitting his wife, or just being disappointed and depressed all the time, like with a nagging sense of like, I'm not worthy. Or he might even become an aggressor when he feels like his masculinity is threatened. And really, who wins in this situation? No one. Point 3 from my perspective, is the men that we're exposed to teach us how men are supposed to be. And we're going through a radical change in the collective consciousness, and our belief systems are changing, and we've held traditional beliefs as a civilization, and so I believe that older brothers, fathers, grandfathers, great grandfathers, they taught us how men should be, right? And then there were times where maybe they were verbally teaching us or giving us lessons on how men should be by correcting us, or by modeling behaviors non-verbally, that we were internalizing through maybe actions, gestures, implications, things like that. Additionally, also women and girls who have deeply internalized patriarchal or toxic masculine propaganda, we also tend to perpetuate toxic masculinity mentality. For example, I did in fact hear my sister, who was probably around 28 at the time, tell our little brother, our cousin, who was maybe, I want to say like 6 or 7 that boys don't cry. Literally, I heard this with my own ears, and I was in shock. Like, she's maybe 3 years older than me. How could she have this mentality? But she had internalized it, and I hope she has changed it so far. Anyway, number 4 is stories that we're told. So from early childhood, we're told stories of strong, brave men, essentially shaping the way that we see the world and the role of men in it. It could be religious stories, it could be bedtime stories, it could be picture books that were read in schools. Could also be movies that we were raised on. All of this fiction that we have been exposed to, there are lessons in identities and core values and belief systems, and stories are never just entertainment. There's always some sort of propaganda behind it. And so we were seeing male adventurers, geniuses, leaders, kings, these kind of characters, these protagonists. Of course, they were all male, and of course it's very natural for people who are observing or watching or consuming this kind of content to want to be the main characters, because they were glorified and portrayed in such a way that sort of made people want to be like someone, be like the protagonist. And of course, mediocre average guys weren't being written about. No one was making movies about like the kid sitting next to me in school, right? That's not interesting. No one wanted to watch that stuff. So we always knew that these average people don't win. The average guys aren't worth anything. You have to be exceptional to be seen. That's always been the mentality. And vulnerable, gentle guys were used as comedic relief. For example, gay men, and they were mocked. And so naturally we learned to mock gay men, and that's not an excuse. That is just the fact that we were being educated in such a way. We are constantly being educated through the fiction that we watch and the stories that we are hearing. And so the lesson that we were taking constantly was that you can't be weak, you can't be any variation or iteration of man. You have to be a strong man to be wanted and to be worthy and to be seen as, a force to be reckoned with. Only great men were role models. And so here we have like generations of little boys hoping to become like alpha men. But what we don't understand is there's a whole journey and a process to becoming such a man, right? And these men it's not easy to become these men. So what people try to do, what other men try to do, is boys try to do, is appear to look like those men. But the thing is, these men went through exceptional circumstances and they rigorously worked on the things that they believed in. It's hard work that goes into becoming someone like a force to be reckoned with, and not everyone can be like an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos. We don't know what they went through, or what their I'm not glorifying these people. I'm just saying that they're the richest people on the planet. So I know a lot of people want to be the richest guy on the planet. I'm just saying, like, it's really hard to be that. And why are we dreaming? Why are so many men dreaming of that? I don't know. Anyway, alright, so on the one hand, there is this desire to be the greatest, which is this huge burden to carry. But on the other hand, is also not knowing how to be that and pretending to be it instead. So naturally, it's this sort of being the appearance of it, being this like the shell of something, is like built on a foundation that isn't strong. And so and additionally, for generations, we've also only consumed male-centered narratives. And so for the longest time, we were only seeing male protagonists, and we were only seeing boys who grew up believing that they were protagonists and women are just props. And it wasn't until the 20th century, and more predominantly in the last few decades, that women started to appear as fully, complex protagonists as well in mainstream storytelling. And this was due to the feminist movements, when they started to sort of bring light to the fact that there was a narrative imbalance, and we weren't seeing a lot of perspectives of sort of, what a protagonist can look like. And so that opened up also the opportunity for nuance to come into storytelling. And so now suddenly we're not seeing only dominant men anymore in mainstream fiction that we're watching, storytelling that we're watching. And that's good, that's really good. But before this, for a long time, we were only consuming a lot of like alpha man, womanizers, like leaders, sort of kings, that kind of content for the longest time. So that also has impacted the way that men were for a while, for a long time. We're seeing changes now. Yeah. Okay, and lastly, biology. So, biology gives men certain traits, like, for example, assertiveness, aggressiveness, this like strength, stuff like that. Like higher testosterone levels, for example, can increase sort of competitiveness, risk taking, but it does not force these traits to become, what do you call it, like wild. It doesn't force men to become like aggressive. It doesn't force men to become like dominant or violent, right? What it does is it essentially creates it's the raw material, and society and you yourself decide how these traits are going to show up. But for the longest time, a lot of societies, a lot of cultures sort of used these biological tendencies and said that, okay, now you are man, so you are angry and you beat up other men, but don't beat up women because women are weak and low. Okay, so like there was a distortion or an exaggeration, or sort of it was a distortion of these natural biological traits and characteristics. And what we failed to do as a society was we failed to teach men, boys, to regulate these impulses or to harness them. And what we've instead done is, as a society, we have glorified the most extreme and aggressive and dominant form of these traits. And so naturally we see things like, oh, anger is the only way to show sort of aggression or assertiveness. But that's not true. It can be taught in different ways. It can show up in different ways. And biology may make men more inclined to be a certain way. But we teach, like toxic masculinity teaches that these instincts don't need to be regulated or harnessed. They actually need to be used to suppress other people, to dominate, to control, so that men can be above everyone. I as a man can be above other people. And it's distorted, it's wrong. And it also it functions on the sort of belief system that compassion is weakness, and like I should be the predator, I should not be the prey. And in that sense, toxic masculinity is not biological. It's not it's we believe that it is rooted in biology. It's just a distortion of it, really. Biology also allows men to be human, which means men also have this deep potential and capability to care, to love, to cry, to have gentleness. But because these belief systems are feminine, and feminine is equal to lady and girl and woman, we don't acknowledge that men can also have these sort of feminine traits and feminine features. It doesn't make any sense, because Men themselves are convinced, are conditioned to believe that they don't need kindness and they don't need love, which is like, what the hell, so dumb. Anyway, yeah, this was the sort of me hypothesizing what's going on. I don't know. If you agree, let me know. If you disagree, also let me know. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.